In this episode of Dr. Dave's Diversions, I'm going to take you on a short tour through my favorite or my best picks for the demos at VCF Midwest that just ended earlier this week, last Sunday. So stick around. Hi, this is Dave. Welcome back to the channel. Last week you might have seen that actually on last Monday, I put up a short video of my pick for best demo, my personal pick. There's no contest there or anything. VCF Midwest that happened in the Chicago area that I was down at last weekend. Just a 3-hour drive or whatever from where I live, so not a big deal, and I stayed overnight at the conference venue. I happened to actually be wearing the shirt from VCF Midwest last year when it was virtual, and I bought this shirt at this year's festival because they had some left. I've never been to the Vintage Computer Festival before. I've never attended such a thing before. So what I want to do today is give you a little tour of what I saw there. I'm just going to show you the subset that had personal meaning to me or some of my favorite things that I saw there. First and foremost though, Ron's Computer Videos is putting up a video today that he and a bunch of us did a panel discussion or a round table about our experience at VCF Midwest. Got to meet Ron there, got to meet RetroTech Chris, I got to meet Steve from Mac 84, I got to meet Steve from another channel, and we had a great time. So check that out if you want to see more people's impression of what kind of experience it was. Go over and check out that video on Ron's Computer Videos, and I'll put it in my VCF Midwest playlist once it's up, so you can see it there. So what I'm just going to do today is I'm going to run through the small set of photographs that I took there and share with you what I saw. I had a really good time at VCF Midwest and really enjoyed seeing people there. Also, I'm outside. You can see it's one of the last days of summer in the Northern Hemisphere, so I'm going to do this outside. I'll pause every once in a while if the sound gets too loud and take care of that in editing, but if it looks a little awkward, that's what I'm doing there. So to start off with, I saw a Commodore PET. I saw lots of Commodore PETs there. It was a good Commodore contingent. I think one of the clubs that formed that runs VCF Midwest was a Commodore specific club in the Chicago area, so there was a lot of great Commodore stuff there. Look at this beautiful PET, an MSD disk drive next to it, just great stuff. This is stuff when I was a teenager that I wanted at least the drive. I never worked on a PET, a little older. Atari 400 and 800 were the first machines I worked on. I never had a Trinity machine, but this was just a gorgeous PET. Next up, this is Ethan Dick's collection that was on display there. What I loved about Ethan's collection is, look on the left there, that's a PET with the calculator, a chiclet keyboard. I've never touched one of those before. Like lots of machines in the demo area, you can touch them, you can work with them. He's got a Space Invaders kind of game running here, and some kind of custom controls up in the front, but I got to touch that keyboard. That was just a joy. Really respect that machine, but never had one. This next picture is an author of a video game, for a modern video game for the Commodore 64. I just loved his enthusiasm, talking about the game with people that went by. And this is like typical of what it looked like there. Of course, unfortunately, we're in the pandemic era. 100% of attendees I saw were masked. It was just wonderful. Lots of people really taking care of other people and taking care of themselves. I appreciated that. In this display, this is someone who collects a bunch of old computers like Data Generals and Points and Entree, Convergent, a bunch of things I hadn't seen before. So just really interesting. I mean, look at that machine down there at the bottom. You're like, is it a sewing machine? Is it a turntable? Is it a computer? It's all three. So pretty neat stuff. My college buddy Derek, who I learned a lot of my computing stuff, he came along, and here we are at David Murray's talk. The guy, David, did a nice talk about the Demoscene, and he used the Commodore 64 as an example, and showed it was kind of light. Showed us some good examples of doing what David said are things that look like they're impossible to do to the 64, and gave us a glimpse of how you do that. One really instructive example that he used was David showed us like a common technique that expert programmers would know called loop unrolling. It's basically where you repeat the code instead of using a loop, and you can get it to run faster that way. So he showed a way that, you know, just blinking the border in the 64, how it looked like it was going 10 times faster if you did the loop unrolling instead of just a normal loop. So really nice combination of exactly what David's an expert at, knowing everything about what's going on in the community, or seemingly everything, plus being an expert programmer. This is, of course, the TRS-80 Model III, one of my favorite machines and really instrumental in my upbringing. When I went to high school, I switched high schools to one that had a computer lab that I could access, and it was full of these TRS-80s. The school, I think, also had an Apple II used for some more advanced classes, but this is what I was used to using, the TRS-80 Model III, and we had them networked with the Radio Shack a network controller, so there were a slew of machines that were lesser models than the Model III, and they didn't have disk drives, and so we, you know, you kind of like flipped a switch, and then those machines could access the floppy disks here. But what my teacher then called Tristos, that's what I learned on while I had a Commodore 64 at home. I was using this in school. Really nice to see that machine again. This machine, this isn't a computer, it's a terminal, the digital VT420. One of the best video terminals there are, in my personal opinion. I worked on this kind of terminal for years in the 90s. I went and took a job at what was a VAX shop, and they were switching over to open systems and Unix. So regardless of which of those kind of machines you worked on, what you wanted to have is a VT420. And sometimes if you were an intern or you just started out, you might have a 320 or even a 220, but if you got the VT420, it was awesome. So I have one of these. You might have seen it in the background in my other videos, but the cool things about the VT420, it can go into 132 columns. It has multiple displays, so if you have multiple serial connections, you can flip screens between multiple sessions, very much like you'd use in like an Xterm window or iTerm under Mac now. And the other thing that's cool, the VT series, at least the 420 and the 320, I don't know when it was introduced, but it had copy and paste on the screen. You could position the cursor, select a portion of text, and paste it back into another session as if you were retyping it. So for the time with dumb terminals, that was the smartest dumb terminal I knew of, and one of my favorite devices for accessing time sharing systems. This is another one of the talks that was given, not a demo. This is a panel session with LGR and Crazy Ken from the Computer Clan and David Murray, and really fun session. You can see it was standing room only. People were really respectful of keeping other people's distance. Mostly we sat one chair away from each other, and so some of us were standing. But neat session. I talked about it more in that Ron's Computer Videos thing, but it was neat to meet these guys, a couple of which, you know, have over 1 million subscribers on YouTube. So it was a really, you know, all different classes of folks in terms of who was in the community, and you could just go and chat with them if you wanted. This is a DEC VT100, a terminal that I used to own. It's a little, I never used it in my work, but I had one that I recycled years ago. And here, what's interesting about this is this one supports Tektronix vector graphics. So the guy Gavin, who set up this PDP here, which you can see in my other VCF Midwest video, and I encourage you to do that because I'm not going to go on at length about this machine here. But this is the one I picked for my favorite demo, or my best demo of the entire event. But he did a nice job of showing off the Tektronix vector graphics on the VT100 here. There were also some ADM3As, and those also had support for the Tektronix graphics and could show it there. And Gavin's running a PDP 1123 here and running some demos to show that. Here's an example of just what a typical sort of demo area where somebody comes to show you their machines. I think these are like three of the best. The Amiga 2000 on the left, that's what I have. The C128D in the middle there, and the SX-64. So just a perfect example. And the MSD drive, I mean, this is like in each one of these eras, this is the top machine you could have of that type. So neat little collection that one of the attendees brought there. Next up, the MITS Altair 8800. Of course, this isn't a real MITS Altair. You can see it's smaller and it has a modern keyboard on it. This is a MITS Altair 8800 replica that first I thought was probably using a Pi, but I looked it up online afterwards, and I have comments, or in the description, check the comments to see if you want to build such a machine. But it's Arduino based, and there's also, I'll also link an Element 14 video where someone made their own case, which is different than this one, but I'll put a link to this project if you're interested in trying to acquire this particular case for an Arduino to emulate the Altair. The Altair, again, a little older than my generation. I think it was announced in '75 in Popular Electronics, but I feel kinship to these. It reminds me of the MSI 8080 that, you know, the character David Lightman used in War Games, one of my favorite or most ever all-time most watched movies. Curiously, even though I didn't use the Altair 8800, which has the Intel 8080, nor did I use the MSI 8080, I did use a Mark 80, which was a sort of a single board computer used for prototyping and experiments. I went to school at college in the 80s, beginning in the 80s, and that was the time that computer science departments were created. You know, before that it was in electrical engineering or the physics department. So I learned TTL logic on an Intel 8080 and Intel 8085 based platform. So those preceded what we call, you know, the x86 architecture now, but they're very similar. It's just a smaller instruction set, a little simpler, but you can see the lineage in the 8080 and the 8085 to the 8086 that essentially remains to this day the preeminent architecture on Intel. So here's a super neat kit. So this machine, back to the TRS-80s, this is a TRS-80 Model 4 portable, the Model 4P. Could you imagine what a crazy luggable? And you know, this is like, it's luggable the way compact PCs were. But sort of the top of the line or the end of the line for the TRS-80 model, you know, Model N series. But pretty cute looking machine. Next up, I'm at Cenbe. If you don't know Cenbe, really active in the Commodore 64 community. I've seen him do talks at VCF events before. I don't remember if it was Midwest or the Vintage Computer Federation ones that happen on the East and West Coast. But Cenbe has done time sharing or multitasking kernel stuff on the 64, and it looks like, from what I learned here, he's also a GEOS developer. So here's what Cenbe was showing off. It's you know, networking, ultimate networking with GEOS. This guy wrote this amazing stuff, and I would say this was probably my vote for second best or also best, most interesting thing I saw at the show. He's got an Ultimate 64 and a regular 64 with an Ultimate 2 Plus cartridge, and what he's doing is he's implemented the Gopher protocol. So back before there was HTTP, back before there was a web, we had Gopher. And Gopher would reach out to other servers and collect information back from you. What Cenbe's written here is using APIs that I'll include a link to for the Ultimate 2, you know, DOS, basically its operating system. How do you interact with it from 64? He's extended GEOS to be able to be a Gopher client and live right in front of you, reached out over the Ethernet to a server and pulled down content and displayed it under GEOS. I mean, amazing stuff. Really talented guy, and I really liked seeing that. Next up, I took this picture of this Atari. I thought I'd never seen this Atari before. I'm like, what is this with this pink and baby blue and pastel colors? Well, it's an Atari XE system. You know, looking it up again, I realized why I didn't know what it was, because I was just hardcore into the Amiga during that time and certainly wasn't interested in some of these like low-end gaming systems. But what an interesting design, right? I mean, the cartridge port on an angle or whatever, just an interesting kind of industrial design. Or re-industrial design. It's basically a repackaging of some of the Atari 8-bit line to make it look more attractive as a gaming system, and then you could add this keyboard on the front. So yet another one of these systems that you know, faded away, but it tried to be the best video system and also be a home computer. Here I'm not a demo, but I'm wandering through this. It's one of the selling areas, and I stumbled across this, the AMAX cartridge in its original box. If you know my channel and my videos, you can go back and watch. I'll link the video here or here, whichever one it is. And this is the AMAX cartridge that I have. This gentleman was originally asking $250 for it. Said that's what it's going for on eBay, and said I could pick it up for $150 if I wanted there. So there were some good deals there, some very unique things. that's pretty neat. But check out my AMEC stuff if you're interested in what that was. And of course, I'm going to mention once again, this is the thing that Frank from Frank's 3D Shop and Frank's Playground have reverse engineered, and we'll be able to you'll be able to make this device with open hardware and make it for tens of dollars instead of 150. I'm sorry. On the second day, there was a talk by Patrick Finnegan. I believe he is professionally he runs a data center, runs the data centers for Purdue University, and I think is one of the founders of VCF Midwest, and/or one of the clubs that runs it. And he did a great presentation, pretty short, but about how he bought on eBay a prototype televideo computer board. This was a CPM computer from the early 80s. He bought an unpopulated board that somehow someone had and reverse engineered it through photography and scanning, and to make a long story short, built the whole thing all over again. So the TS-80 computer, which it looks like a video terminal, but it's basically a board that is the video terminal that was, I think, 6502 based, and then the Z80 based computer on the same board. So really neat platform, an early computer with high performance networking. Patrick told us it could do 800 kilobaud, communicating to a shared server, file server, so pretty neat stuff. And then up next is this machine really caught my eye. I'd never seen it before. You see what it is there? It says it's an Acorn A3000. So this would have been, it's a shame that these machines weren't really popularized in the US. This machine, it looks kind of like a Commodore Amiga 500, it looks kind of like an Atari ST, and it was a competitor of theirs. Maybe a little lower priced, similarly engineered on short time scales, but this is a real RISC machine, I believe. You correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not an expert on Acorns, but I looked up a little information on it, and this machine, I believe it runs the ARM3 processor. This is in the late 80s, and while we were running all these CISC architectures like the 68000, this thing had a RISC machine as its processor. And the reason why this, well, first it caught my eye because of its appearance, but I'm thinking, just about that time, then I was going into college, we were studying RISC machines. We looked at various early RISC machines, and then you got into the Motorola like 8000, which is a RISC machine, and then it's really near and dear to my heart because was the core of my work. My favorite machine to work on, although I used tons of different brands of Unix machines in the early 90s, my favorite machine was running HPUX. And HP's architecture at the time was called PA RISC, Precision Architecture RISC. They were neat because they were full time sharing systems, full blown, all the APIs and stuff you'd expect under Unix, plus they were real time systems. By being a real time system, you could guarantee that a process would be serviced. So you can do machine controls, you can do automation with it. So really significant platform. And so I got to know RISC machines pretty well. And it would have been neat to have something like this, in the 80s, and kind of get in early on that RISC architecture. I think, now the way ARM's gone, this is an early foundational sort of platform and machine. And then I just took an Uber back to O'Hare and caught the bus back to Madison, Wisconsin, where I live, where I had a little time to kill, and so I bought this $12.50 can of beer. You can't beat those, or you can only beat airport pricing, huh? So anyway, I just thought it was funny. It's a Chicago brand, but it's called Spiteful IPA, and I was pretty spiteful as I was signing the credit card receipt, and I was like, this beer costs $12. Anyway, that's what I have for you. That's what I have for you today. Had a great time at VCF Midwest. Definitely go check out the video that Ron's putting up with 6 or 7 of us talking about our experience at VCF Midwest. Hope to see you there in the future. Say goodbye to summer. It's the end of it's a fall and autumn are upon us. But anyway, I'll see you next time. Take care.